has announced a naval blockade on Israel's Haifa port, saying the move comes in response to Israel's escalating military campaign in Gaza. Houthi military spokesperson Yahya Saree said the group would begin enforcing the blockade and warned all shipping companies that Haifa port has now been added to their list of targets. He said the action is in retaliation for what he described as Israel's brutal aggression in Gaza and against the Yemeni people. He added that the attacks on Israel would stop once the war in Gaza ends and the blockade is lifted. Let's listen in to what the Houthi military spokesperson has said.
العظيم ردا على تصعيد العدو الإسرائيلي عدوانه الوحشي على إخواننا وأهلنا في غزة وارتكاب العشرات من المجازر يوميا ووقوع المئات من الضحايا في جريمة إبادة جماعية لم يشهد لها العالم مثيلا، وردا على استمرار الحصار والتجويع، وردا على رفض العدو إيقاف عدوانه ورفع حصاره، فإن القوات المسلحة اليمنية بالتوكل على الله وبالاعتماد عليه قررت بعون الله تعالى تنفيذ توجيهات القيادة ببدء العمل على فرض حظر بحري على ميناء حيفا، وعليه تنوه إلى كافة الشركات التي لديها سفن متواجدة في هذا الميناء أو متجهة إليه بأن الميناء المذكور صار منذ ساعة إعلان هذا البيان ضمن بنك الأهداف، وعليها أخذ ما ورد في هذا البيان وما سيرد لاحقا بعين الاعتبار.
Well, rejoining us is Ross Feingold, the political risk analyst, joining us from Taipei. Ross, thank you for being back here and staying around. Before we come on to the Houthi blockade that they have spoken about, I want to first talk about the situation in Gaza. Of course, ongoing strikes. The Israeli military has intensified their military action since the ceasefire ended back in March, but focusing firstly on these comments from the UK, France and Canada condemning the military action and aid blockades. Benjamin Netanyahu has responded, but does this show a bigger difference and a bigger gap now between some Western leaders and Israel, where before there was general support for Israeli action following October the 7th?
Casualties, including the high number of casualties just in recent days, has clearly evaporated support or patience that some of the Western European countries and Canada may have previously had for Israel. We don't see that kind of criticism coming out of the Trump administration in the United States, but certainly from Western Europe we see that criticism. But one thing is clear, it doesn't change Netanyahu's decision-making as far as how to prosecute the war in Gaza.
Yes, absolutely. Of course, Netanyahu has been clear in his aims, the return of all hostages, the disbanding and disarmament of Hamas, and to make sure that they are not able to launch another offensive like the one on October the 7th, 2023. There has been a return, even though it is limited, of UN aid getting into Gaza. Ross, looking at the state of play in Gaza and given the reports from many humanitarian groups that starvation is common across the Gaza Strip, why has it taken so long for Israel to allow UN aid trucks into the enclave?
One of the main concerns of Israel is that aid will be diverted to Hamas for the use by Hamas's soldiers. So this is a problem that's been ongoing throughout the period of the war. Whenever aid has been let in, it's clear that some of it does get diverted, and it's not 100% delivered to civilians. And people want to dispute that, but I do think they're wrong. It's clear that Hamas needs to feed its fighters, and they do this by taking some of the aid that's meant for civilians. So this is a legitimate concern of Israel. However, it's clear global opinion, maybe with the exception of the United States, that global opinion is that more aid should be provided to civilians. So Israel is sensitive to that, although they don't like the comments made by the Western European countries and Canada in recent hours. I think Israel is sensitive to the global criticism about what's happening to civilians and the lack of food, and we see some movement from the Israeli government to facilitate food aid entering into Gaza.
Yes, and this aside of the US plan that has been announced with private firms set to help to bring aid into the Gaza Strip. Ross, I want to move now to the statement from the Houthis in Yemen regarding this maritime blockade that has been announced. How effective, firstly, do you think this could be?
It certainly increases the danger for shipping trying to go in and out of Israel's Haifa port. It also increases the likelihood that should the Houthis launch missiles at Haifa or at ships calling or departing from Haifa, that Israel is going to retaliate. And Israel is going to retaliate with much more force than Yemen throws at Israel. And the situation could spiral out of control again. We also have that truce between the Houthis and the United States, which also might become in jeopardy because the United States is such a close ally of Israel. So I really hope the Houthis think twice and they don't do this, because it's just going to escalate tensions in the region even more. And Houthis' main backer being Iran, they also should think twice about what really is the value of doing this, of causing a conflict between people in Yemen and Israel, where civilians in Yemen are going to pay the price. It doesn't really change the situation in Gaza by the Houthis doing this and Iran backing them. It doesn't change the situation in Gaza at all. It doesn't change Israel's war policy in Gaza. It doesn't change how much food Israel lets into Gaza. So this is just a very, frankly, stupid move by the Houthis, and hopefully they'll think twice.
Ross, very quickly to end this discussion, I want to look at those rising tensions in the region. Of course, as we know, this conflict in Gaza has been ongoing since the 7th of October 2023. There have been words from Western leaders. There's also been action, of course, from the United States. But given there is such an impasse in this conflict, given both sides are suffering with hostages being held dead and alive by Hamas, and over 2 million people in Gaza living in a humanitarian crisis, how is that next step looked at with effectiveness in order to work towards real peace for millions of people living in the Middle East?
One thing that needs to happen is Hamas needs to release the hostages, and they need to disband. Otherwise, Israel is going to continue proceeding with its war aims. And this decision is up to the Hamas leadership. They are responsible for an extraordinary amount of civilian suffering because of their decision to initiate this attack and then to continue the war and not surrender. And now we have a war that's been going on since October of 2023. At the moment, at least, it seems no end in sight. In fact, at the moment, even another ceasefire seems difficult, even though they're starting to talk again through the mediators. But very much this is up to Hamas, and Hamas could really save the people of Gaza if they would lay down their weapons and release the hostages.
Yes, absolutely. Ross Feingold, thank you ever so much for joining us on both.